Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to another Underdog Fantasy Live Best Ball Draft. If you're watching this live, you know that the date is July 13th. It is a Thursday, and sorry, I have the audio on my end. All right, there we go. So, July 13th, Thursday, if you're watching this on replay, now you know when we drafted this team. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co founder at Occupy Fantasy, joined by Chris Rooney, our, I would say, jack of all trades. He does a little bit of everything for us right now, working on some best ball drafts. Chris, you did a stream last night. How did that go, and how you feeling today?
You're making me talk about this again. Had an awesome Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Ramondre Stevenson start. I was all amped up to select Joe Burrow in round 4 and get that really high upside start to a Chiefs Bengal stack. And the user before me fucking took Joe Burrow out from under me, Brian. So I'm definitely over it. I'm not tilting. I'm tilting. No, we're going to draft again today. I'm going to see if it can go a little bit better on this show here. But happy to be on the mic with you this afternoon. I love picking your brain on all things, fantasy contests. And obviously, this is the newest format that we've been talking about. We're going to draft Best Ball Mania 4 today, Brian. Obviously, you can talk with me as I'm making my picks about some things you've learned. I know this is really the first year you are attacking best ball as hard as you are. So I'm really interested in what you've learned since it's probably been about a month since I did a show with you directly. So I
Yeah.
think this is going to be a pretty good experience for me. I'm going to enter the contest now. We'll see how close we get to that kicking off. And we're right at the beginning of a new lobby here. There's 10 spots available for a fast draft in Best Ball Mania 4 right now. For this one that I'm trying to enter here on Underdog Fantasy. So if anybody's watching live with us and would like to participate, feel free to head on over to Underdog and enter this contest for $25. Brian, if there are viewers that have not yet started playing on Underdog, I believe we have an offer for them they can take advantage of, right?
Exactly. Use promo code Occupy. Get a 100% deposit match bonus up to $100 on Underdog Fantasy. No better way than to start drafting best ball teams if you haven't. Then with a free $100, and I would even argue you could use that right now. You get the $100 instantly. And if you want to start a reign of terror, you can use 25 of those dollars into this draft and snipe all of Chris's picks and enjoy the aftermath. I mean, I can't think of a better way to use $25 on a Thursday, but that's my opinion, Chris.
Brian, I don't know how I feel about this. Your best use of $25 on a Thursday afternoon is to just torture me live on the air. It certainly would be good for content for the channel for sure. So I'm down to be a good sport about it if that's the case. If anybody wants to do that here, need 8 more people to come in. All right. I guess there's a few things that we can talk about while we wait for this. I'll leave this up on the screen. The ADP tracker on the website. Our best ball tool is completely free right now. We've got the ADP tracker and a stack seeker that lets you filter by team to see which players you want to pair with some of the early players you draft in these contests. Brian, I know you and I are both using those extensively. This afternoon, I was taking a look at original ADP when these contests open at the end of April versus ADP today, and some pretty big changes for a lot of players on both ends of the spectrum. Players that have seen their costs go way, way up, players that have seen their costs go way, way down. I'm not going to assume you've had a chance to look at that. I'll give you a couple of them here. The biggest move, Jerick McKinnon with the Chiefs has seen his ADP drop by about 80 spots since the contest opened. Obviously, that's because of him re-signing with the Chiefs. He was not on the roster when the contest opened here. The player that has fallen the most, though, Trey Lance with the San Francisco 49ers. Feels like Trey Lance is not going to be a thing this year. I don't know if you did get a chance to look, but those were a couple things I learned this morning.
Yeah, so actually, I just posted the link to your tweet with those movers in the chat. So for those of you who haven't seen it yet, there's the direct link. And yeah, I actually did want to talk about this, Chris, as we wait for this to fill. I mean, we've seen Purdy's ADP move into the 14, 15 round range, depending on the contest. Lance basically undrafted now. I still don't get it. Like, and maybe I've missed this, and maybe I'm just not reading into the situation correctly. But have we actually seen concrete data or concrete reports that Purdy is definitely the guy? Lance is definitely not the guy. Purdy's on track to start week 1. Lance is dust. Like, have we actually seen this, or is it just people reading between the lines and taking shots on Purdy?
I do think there's a little bit of smoke from our trusted beat reporters on this, Brian. Guys like Matt Mayoko, who's been a trusted San Francisco 49er beat writer that we have, relied on in the past in daily fantasy sports contests when we're prepping for that kind of stuff. So that's definitely what's driving the move here. But even if Trey Lance is not a San Francisco 49er, I feel like he's going to contribute somewhere. I don't think it makes sense for them to continue holding on to him as some kind of super expensive insurance policy for their late round draft pick at quarterback. I feel like it's going to come to a head with training camp opening here in July, Brian. Probably next week is definitely next week. I'm just not sure what day it is when 49er camp will open. And obviously, I think we'll get somewhat of a resolution there. It feels extremely quickly for Purdy to be healed from that Tommy John surgery that he had to have, but obviously not out of the realm of possibility. We got the third pick this afternoon, so I assume Jefferson and Chase are going to go here right off the top of the draft. And honestly, I'm fine with that. I have pretty much any direction I could go with the third overall pick. Do you have a preferred pick after Chase and Jefferson are gone? Have you started to key in on any particular player, or are you just kind of taking whoever you feel like?
Yeah, it's tough. I feel like there are merits to all these guys, and I'm leaning more towards Tyreek having the most upside, and even a little bit of meat left on the bone from last year. So I've been taking him more, but really I've just been trying to mix in the guys, the three guys, those three ADPs, and just get equal exposure to what I can.
So I got Tyreek. I did not necessarily rely on your opinion to make my selection. I just have a little bit more Cooper Cup than Tyreek in my portfolio right
Right.
now, so I'm trying to balance that out a little bit. So that's a little bit of my mindset here. We've got championship week against the Baltimore Ravens for the Miami Dolphins this season. So that is the first thing I am looking at now throughout the rest of this contest, Brian. And then we have some other correlations with Dallas Cowboys in the semifinals and the New York Jets in the first round of the fantasy playoffs.
All right, so this is a good time to talk about this because I've found myself in similar situations. So I have two questions for you. The second question is more wide ranging, and so we'll talk about that second. But first of all, I found myself again since I really started drafting heavily this offseason and relying on our ADP tracker tool and really not having a ton of experience as far as balancing allocations. In that, when I take someone in the first round, let's say Tyreek here, my first immediate goal is all right, let's stack him up with his 3, 15, 16, 17 partners, try to get a quarterback in that group, right? As I've loaded up on those stacks, some of those teams have looked pretty similar and I've missed out on some other guys. So what I've been doing now, Chris, is to balance it out even more as I pick Tyreek in the ADP Stack Secret tool on Occupy Fantasy. They who they play again? Baltimore. Who are the three teams?
Baltimore in week 17, Dallas week 16, and the Jets in week 15.
Okay, so I will put those three teams in addition to Miami in the Stack Seeker, and then I'll put the teams that those teams play into the Stack Seeker, and then start building up that way sometimes too. That way, I'm not just automatically getting Tua and Waddle. Sorry, Tua and Tyreek when I get the 3 pick. Not automatically getting Lamar Jackson and Tyreek. Really just trying to mix it up. Maybe I go Aaron Rodgers. Maybe I go an opponent of one of those teams, and then try to weave my web that way.
I actually like that a lot. I do kind of tend to look at some of the players I'm thinking about for round two and plug them into. I work off of a spreadsheet, off to
Right.
the side of my own, and see what their matchups are. And I consider some of those players as well. So very similar to what you're doing in the Stack Seeker. I use the Stack Seeker when I'm not doing streams as well for similar approaches. I do want to talk about this first round. This has been a little crazy. We saw Cooper
Whoa.
Cup fall all the way to 9.
Yeah.
3 running backs right in a row after my pick. So this could be a kind of a weird room today, Brian. We'll see how it goes from here. I'm going to stick with the rule of the channel and not talk about the names of the players
Very
that I'm
smart.
considering here because I don't want to have a situation like I had last night with Chuck where I'm just absolutely furious at the beginning of the show. I am kind of interested in doing something a little different with Tyreek. I'll keep it that broad. I don't know if I want to go with Tua in this one, but there are definitely still ways to correlate with Tyreek Hill that makes sense throughout the rest of this contest. And that's because I agree with you. I think if I always go, okay, I have Tyreek, I'm going to go with hopefully Waddle if he falls to me. Obviously, he didn't in this contest. Tua and maybe a Raven wide receiver. Like all my teams are going to look exactly the same when I have
Yep.
Tyreek Hill. And that's probably bad. So I'm going to try to do something a little different here. We'll see
That's
how
fair.
these picks go before me, though. Um, asked Chuck a few times about, things like, I feel like we're all on the same page with this stuff. I love getting the Mahomes Kelsey start. Obviously, we know how high upside that is, but I feel like that is the toughest starting combo to build a team around this year. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sorry, I
No, you're good.
looked away for one
Uh,
second. I know you're talking about Mahomes and Kelsey, but what was the exact question?
Drafting the rest of your roster once you get that start is kind of difficult, right? I mean, do you have any? I guess
Yeah.
that's kind of the consensus between Chuck and myself and others I've drafted with on the channel here. I didn't know if you had feelings that were slightly different than that, though. I mean, missing out on those high end receivers and running backs in the first 2 rounds here. Obviously, you're getting the best alternative to those players with this high upside combo, but it just makes the rest of your draft pretty difficult, I think.
No, totally agree. Chuck and I were actually talking about this when last time we were on, I think a week ago or so. And I really don't have a ton of exposure to high end quarterbacks and tight ends. And I don't know if that was just organic or just because of this. But yeah, your teams do end up really gross and tough to fill out, especially if you take two. Um, so who are you thinking about here?
I went with Mark Andrews at tight end,
Okay, nice.
and we'll see if I am able to pull off what I'm angling for here. It should be somewhat readily apparent what I'm trying to do. Higgins, Devontae Smith, yes. Okay. So this is a little bit of a reach, Brian, but I am very interested in getting Ravens and Dolphins stacks in my portfolio. And now I have Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Tyreek Hill, first 3 rounds. I feel like this is one of the only ways you can really do this. So, in a high risk tournament environment,
Yeah.
just I'm okay with reaching a little bit to lock that down.
Totally agree. And actually, it's funny you say that because when Chuck and I were talking last week, Lamar Jackson, I can't remember if Chuck agreed, but it was the guy that I felt the least exposed to that I needed to get more exposure to. I feel like that offense has higher upside now if they pass more and with Todd Monken at the offensive coordinator spot. So I agree. I've been trying to get Lamar a little more. I had 3 entries into the 101. I think it was the Dalmatian,
Okay.
and I actually ended up taking a Lamar Andrews stack and that one in my third team, really because I do want some more dollar exposure to the Ravens offense, specifically Lamar Jackson. And that leads me to my second question was that I was alluding to earlier, Chris, is you've done 30 or 40 drafts so far. Looking through your exposures, are there any spots where you feel like, shit, I'm really light, or I didn't even realize I didn't have that much of this guy or this team? Are there any spots like that where over the next month or so you're going to put a concerted effort in to try to get more exposure to them?
Yeah, one of them is this Raven spot. We're on the same wavelength. Looking at what I have, I think I had maybe either one or zero teams with Lamar Jackson. Have a bit of Andrews because I think he's a little easier to pair with some of the Dolphins players I've been getting.
Yep.
But that's something I'm trying to do throughout the rest of July and into August. I did build a team where I stacked the Chargers in rounds 3 through 5. They're another expensive
Nice.
stack, but I didn't really have any of them, so I want some more of that. And then the artist who apparently goes by the name of Steezy Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. I don't have any Trevor Lawrence stacks yet, so don't think I'm going to do that here today, Brian. But that is something else on the back of my mind as I enter these contests. I probably need some more Jaguar exposure. My problem with the getting to the Jaguars is I just feel like the range of outcomes with Ridley is super wide, so I'm not as interested in him as other wide receivers in this range. Moose actually agreed with me on that. We talked about that on Sunday's show. Christian Kirk, I like, but his cost is very close to a lot of wide receivers I'm very high on, mainly Terry McLaurin and Chris Godwin.
Yeah, and yeah, I think the Charger stack is one in particular that we need more exposure to. We have the change in offensive coordinator once again, and both the Chargers and Jacksonville are in that. They're really the same type of team when it comes to drafting, where they have multiple receivers around 3 through 5. Their quarterback in best ball is going around 5 or 6, and really their opponents don't. There are no first or second round ADPs outside of Stephon Diggs for the
Mm.
Chargers and Josh Jacobs in the Charger stacks that you really are taking in rounds 1 and 2. So if you're building around your top two players in terms of stacks, you're not getting to these teams organically. So really what you have to do and get into a mindset, what I've been doing lately is let's keep an open mind to these teams. And if I take Ridley at his ADP, or if I take Keenan or Mike Williams, whoever it is, let's pivot a little bit and let's think about getting Chargers or Jacksonville as my primary stack, and then whoever I drafted round 1 or round 2, let's try to get a secondary stack where those are potential players in weeks 15 through 17.
So I'm going to do something a little off. Actually, no, this is right at cost, and I'm okay with it. I think this is my first share of this player on Underdog this season. I love Brandon Ayuk this year, Brian. There's starting to be a lot more talk about him looking much better this season than he did last season from some of his teammates. I believe I read a quote from Kyle Juszczyk about that. He just looks way faster out there. Obviously, everybody looks good in shorts, Brian, but
Yeah.
there is some correlation with the Baltimore Ravens in week 16. The 49ers are their semifinals, fantasy semifinals week opponents. So now I've got some correlation there as well.
Love that. And Ayuk's ADP has already gone up a round or two. And I was actually talking with one of our original co-founders, Waleed, about this the other day because Waleed plays in managed high stakes leagues where you have to set your lineups, and I can't imagine doing free agents every single week anymore. But he plays in those types of leagues, and he was making the argument that guys like Ayuk are much tougher to swallow in those weeks, and I mean, sorry, in those leagues because when
Mm-hmm.
are you going to know to start Ayuk? When they have a likely lower pass volume option offense, still have Debo and Kittle and McCaffrey. Whereas in Underdog Best Ball, we know he's going to have some spike weeks and he's going to have some big weeks as he did last year, and maybe even takes a step forward. So I don't mind taking him above ADP here as opposed to a managed league where I could see the headache in trying to figure out when to slot Ayuk into your lineup.
So we're going to continue to go very zero RB here. I like Marquise Brown in this spot just because I have some correlation with Ayuk
Yep.
in week 15 with the 40 excuse me with the 49ers, excuse me. So now I've got Ayuk maximally correlated, excuse me, in each of the playoff weeks, and that allows me to consider probably trying to angle for Brock Purdy late in this draft as my second and likely final quarterback, with Lamar Jackson being an early round selection for me.
I like that. So now that's the one thing I've been juggling and trying to consider. If you do take someone like Purdy, Kyler Murray, I'm trying to think who else fits the bill here, but those types of guys late, and you have a stud quarterback, are you just willing to punt that position if they're out or benched by the time Lamar's bye rolls around and just take that 1 week hit? Or are you going to sacrifice that one roster spot for potentially only 1 week of action? That's something I've been trying to think about.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. I just think in terms of the draft, I have to draft as if I'm correct for this
True.
team to be a winner. And if Lamar Jackson isn't the best quarterback most weeks, then I'm probably not doing well anyway. So having three quarterbacks on my roster feels more wrong than taking that 1-0 in week 13 if I have to. So I guess truthfully, I haven't thought about it a tremendous amount, but that's where I net out right now. I feel like the reward of having that third quarterback does not outweigh the risk of having the two. So I'd rather just have the two.
No, I think you're right, and especially if this was like a cash game or like half the people advanced out of round one, weeks 1 through 13, sure. But yeah, in this tournament setting, very high risk payouts, lopsided payouts. I think no, I think you're definitely on the right page there. So, um, let me see here. DJ Moore just went. Where does DJ Moore sit in your projections? Because obviously people are very polarized on this subject of DJ Moore. Where do you have him? Do you think he's a value? Is he appropriately valued? Is he overvalued in his round 4, round 5 ADP in Chicago?
DJ Moore is my wide receiver 54 in my half point per
Oh
reception
shit.
rankings
Okay.
this season. I think that's definitely low. I'm not going to say that it's not, but my projections start at the team level, Brian, and I look at, how is this offense likely to call plays this year? I don't, even as a wide receiver one for Justin Fields, I don't know if the overall passing volume is going to be there for the Bears this year. So I'm having a hard time projecting him much higher. He's right next to like Nico Collins, Rondale Moore, Zay Jones in my rankings. So this is one of those players, just kind of to hit on a point you were making earlier. I'm going to have to force myself to take him at least a little bit just to get exposure to him, because if I just draft by my rankings every single time, I'm never taking him.
Right, and that's how I feel, not just about DJ Moore, but other guys in particular. Dalvin Cook's an example where I still feel like the burn possibility is really low for me, having 0% Dalvin Cook. And again, if we're drafting for correlation, we're not going to get guys who aren't on teams like D Hop and Dalvin and Zeke and Fournette and all these other guys. I just don't know. And Chris, I want to get your opinion here because I was talking with some other people about it, and I just don't feel like there's really a landing spot or a situation where Dalvin Cook is is beating his ADP by such a wide margin that I'll regret not having any shares. Do you feel differently? Do you think that there are spots or injuries that could open up that, hey, Brian, maybe you want to get some Dalvin Cook just in case he's not super washed and just in case something happens? What do you think?
Getting picked close to like Pacheco, James Conner, Javante Williams, even a James Cook, Brian, I feel like I'm way more interested in those players.
Yeah,
I'd rather take a shot on guys that are in similar situations to Cook, like Ezekiel Elliott or Leonard Fournette, about 100 picks later, because they're basically free draft picks. You're investing a pretty high pick in Dalvin Cook. And obviously, we've seen what Cook can do in the football field. He's a phenomenal player when he gets the touches and he gets the opportunities. But we do not know where those opportunities are going to come, how many opportunities he's going to get. Miami is, I guess, the chalk expectation right now, right? And even if he joins the Dolphins, it's going to be similar to those 49er backfields of old we have been used to,
right.
where it's just going to be a different player every single week that has the upside. All right, it is time for me to make a selection here. And I think I've waited quite a bit to select a running back. I'm on pick 70,
Dalvin
and
Cook.
uh, Miles Sanders has the best, I guess, delta between his ADP and the pick number I'm on here, and I'm fine with just gobbling up value. I do buy into the wisdom of the crowd a little bit on these prices, Brian, and so I'm happy to take Miles Sanders behind his ADP, even though there's no direct correlation with my team here.
Yeah, I vastly prefer Miles Sanders in the late sixth round than I do in the mid fifth, where I've seen him go sometimes. So I don't mind that. And yeah, and for those of you out there who are playing the correlation game, sometimes there are rounds where nobody really fits, and you don't want to reach a round or two to get a guy when you can get him around later. And sometimes it's worth this just playing the ADP value game, whether it's on Underdog or I know there's a lot of talk out there about DraftKings this week because they're giving out tickets and promotions that there's some big ADP values if you draft over on DraftKings this week, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with with gaining some ADP value while you're drafting. I mean, in fact, I would say it's encouraged.
All right. Player that I am extremely high on. In fact, I can tell you that this team, their starters in general, is my highest exposures, but I just cannot stop clicking on the Buccaneers. I was going to take Mike Evans. He's gone. So great take by me there. I am going to take Gabe Davis, though, because I don't have enough of him. And obviously, I ran out of time there. I had to make a selection. So that's what I get, Brian. I'm trying to track who's gone off the screen here, and I missed a player. So, fuck me, right? But no, Gabe Davis and the Bills obviously still think they're going to be one of the best teams in the league this year. And the Patriots are a team that obviously near and dear to my heart, been my team since I was a little kid, but like the Patriots more so because all of their receivers are cheap this year. It has nothing to do with like homerism. I feel like I'm going to be able to correlate with Davis at some point in the rest of this draft. So I'm okay with that.
Dude, it's super easy. And I'm looking now. I was actually going to bring this up earlier. If you look at the ADP mover tool, the ADP tracker, and you look at the last week, Tyquan Thornton, Juju Smith-Schuster, Pierre Strong, all of their ADPs have moved up almost a round or a half a round, basically, to where you have to acquire them earlier than you did a week ago. I imagine that is some of the news of D Hop probably not signing there because Thornton, we saw some positive buzz throughout the offseason. He steadily moved up. Juju was dropping some. But now to see all three in the highest or the biggest mover group, I imagine it's the D Hop news, but I don't know if your in New England reporting has heard anything.
Yeah, it's the same thing that I think everybody's been reading over the last 24 to 48 hours, Brian. It seems like the Titans have made the more aggressive contract offer to Hopkins. That's what's been leaked. So I don't know if that's, a push by Hopkins people to maybe get the Patriots to up their offer or another team to enter the fray. Obviously, I think the hope from, I guess, people who are DeAndre Hopkins fans in general want the Chiefs to get involved there. The rumor is the Chiefs potentially freeing up some cap space with some other contract changes with players on their existing roster might free them up to make an offer there. Obviously, that would be super interesting. But just to stay on your question, both a Chiefs scenario or a Titans scenario means not the Patriots, and that's what's going to affect Patriot prices because we did think it was going to be New England for quite a while there.
Yeah, and I will say, different from the Dalvin Cook situation where there's only I still think maybe only Miami outside of some big injuries in training camp where it makes sense for Dalvin to exceed his ADP. I think D Hop can go a few places and command number one wide receiver target share, which makes him a little safer in my eyes. But you're curious to hear if you're out or in on D Hop at his fourth round ADP.
It's obviously different positions, but it's an even more expensive uh, version of the uncertainty with Dalvin Cook. And
True.
maybe this I've admitted on a couple shows. I feel like this could be a leak in my process, but I am not interested in drafting uncertainty when I can avoid it. I would relate this as a close cousin to deliberately avoiding injured players. I feel like drafting players on purpose that aren't going to be available for every week of the contest feels pretty bad. So I just don't think Hopkins is someone I'm going to be selecting. I took him while he was still on the Cardinals a couple times, and I feel like I'll start drafting him once I know a little bit more about what his season's going to look like. We should have a resolution here soon on that, though.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing is there's not much downside in that strategy, Chris, because once he gets signed, there really aren't many spots where his ADP will move up a full round or down a full round. Maybe if he goes to Tennessee, it drops a full round, but even so, I think you're probably safe in that. Where I still think you're safe in not drafting Dalvin for the same reason. So you don't have to name particular names here, Chris, but heading towards the back half of round 8 here, what are your your strategic thoughts here?
Well, I was going to ask you a question. I'm out on Tua here. If I didn't have Lamar, I would be considering him.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on getting the both sides of the Week 17 game with the quarterback? Are you in favor of it? Are you avoiding it? I don't think I've asked you this yet.
Yeah, it feels wrong, and I think the data does support that it is wrong for this type of contest because you want to give yourself 2 full game stack chances in week 17 if you do somehow miraculously make the final. You don't want all your eggs in one basket, and you can't use both quarterbacks. So I think I would try to avoid it if at all possible. Sometimes it's unavoidable, especially if you take 3 cheap quarterbacks. But I would certainly try to get a different game stack. That way, if that game busts and all of Lamar, Andrews, Tyreek teams that have made it this far on the backs of those guys, they bust, and now I don't know, man. Your Mac Jones, your Brock Purdy stacks go off. Just less competition.
So I did take James Conner here in round 8, and I feel pretty good about having Sanders and Conner as my 2 starting running backs, even though I waited 6 rounds to start selecting running backs. In general, Brian, I am in favor of going very wide receiver heavy and waiting on these running backs. I've come very, very strongly around on that over the last couple of days. Back on the clock so quickly. That's one of the only problems with doing content here. Pick number 99. I do need a Jaguar, and maybe this is a little weird given that I have. Of course, he's gone again. I fucked myself not realizing that Evan Ingram was gone, but I'll take Tyler Boyd, very high upside wide receiver here as a somewhat of a panic pick.
No worries. That's 2 panic picks
Missed,
out of 9. That's not bad.
missed Evan Ingram by about 8 picks here. That's all right. But what I was going to say there is because I took Sanders and we hit on not having a direct correlation earlier, I know that I can probably find a Jaguar correlation at some point through the rest of this draft if I want it. I believe there's like another running back lingering out there that I could probably layer in to make that correlation work. I'm not going to force it if I don't have to, but I'm always okay, Brian, with taking Tyler Boyd here in the 9th, 10th round and finding another Chief that I can correlate later for that game environment as well.
Yeah, he seems similar to me to Ayuk in the way that it would probably be really difficult to decide which weeks to start Tyler Boyd in a managed league, but we know he's going to have some big weeks in a big offense, and I don't mind the 9th, 10th round ADP whatsoever. So going back to your point about the running backs and zero running back, if you want to call it, depending on how early you take your first running back. A lot of my teams have been built this way, maybe one running back early and then a few late. And generally running back, if I look at my teams after the fact, look pretty gross for the most part. And I'm really just eyeing committee backs, high upside backs, rookie backs, backups on really good offenses late to round it out, and hoping that 2 hit over the course of the season. We've seen it happen time and time again. So I would much rather my running back room be the weakest part than any other position on my team.
This is where, and it's probably the same for you. Obviously, I don't need to speak for you on it. You can interject, but the DFS play over the last few years has influenced my thinking here. I feel like week in and week out, when we're building our content out and then building our lineups to actually play in contests, Brian, we have one of these running backs we never even thought of during the summer as a usable player that flashes as someone that we can use. Obviously, we don't know what the answers to the test are going to be here on July 13th, but we do know in general some of these guys like Travion Williams maybe with the Bengals, or Kyron Williams with the Los Angeles Rams. Like, these are players we're not drafting in these contests, but they may have big roles at some point during the season. So I am more than okay with taking a few lottery tickets at running back in the middle to the end of these contests.
Yeah, I feel 100% the same way. And there are guys I'm just trying to mix in. We talk about the Cincinnati backup running back situation, Minnesota running backs, the backups if Madison doesn't work out or gets injured, Dallas. Like there are a bunch of guys down there, and those guys aren't going to contribute very often. But if they do contribute, it's likely it's likely a pretty decent score, and it's probably in pretty important weeks. So yeah, I'm certainly fine. I'm, obviously your team is going to look a lot weaker if you wait to draft a running back, is your fifth or sixth running back in round 17 or 18. But again, we're playing for if we're right here and our other running backs do what they need to do, and this guy busts out weeks 15, 16, 17, no one really has him. That's how you win these high upside, large payday contests.
And I am approaching it from the mindset of I only need two of these running backs to score points to hit my lineup every single week. I feel like going a little more heavy at wide receiver. That's where I'm going to get my flex position most weeks if things go the way that we want throughout the duration of the season with our teams. All right. So we're up in a couple of picks here. There's a couple of different directions I can go. We got a 1-2-5-1 build going here. And this is very similar to how I start a lot of my teams, Brian. So I'm feeling pretty good. We're on the clock, and I am going to take Zay Jones for that correlation with Miles Sanders with the
There you
Jaguars.
go. That's perfect. That works out really well. I will not ask you any questions for the next four picks because I don't want any panic picks from you. So I will talk a little bit myself, and I will say that there are some teams that a lot of their guys go early. Jacksonville's one, I guess you could say. Tampa Bay's really one that I end up a lot with Kate Otten at tight end as my third tight end if I need Tampa Bay correlation. Just because if you miss out on Evans, Godwin, Rashad White, like there's nobody else, right? Maybe you take Russell Gage round 18. Maybe you take Chase Evans round 18. I prefer K. Dotton the most. I talked about this with Chuck some too. And there's some teams like that that's really difficult. You may end up with some heavy exposure to really shitty players on a team really late. And I think that's the reason. I don't think it's bad. I don't know if it's necessarily good, but I think if you have strong conviction on an offense being higher than the field is on, or a player being higher than the field is on, I don't think it's that bad.
So we went with Jerick McKinnon here in the 11th round, and I have not been selecting him much over the last month. I took him a lot early when his price was way cheaper, but I guess I was a little influenced here, Brian, by doing that kind of data analysis of how ADPs have moved over the last 75 days, whatever that time period is. And
True.
I think it's probably fair to see that there's upside with McKinnon, seeing his ADP rise 80 spots. I'm okay with getting him as my third running back on this roster here. I feel like he's a little bit safer than someone like Eli Mitchell, who doesn't catch passes. I'm expecting the touchdowns to be less aggressive from McKinnon this year, Brian, but still in one of the better offenses in football. So more than okay with him.
Oh, you don't think he's going to get a touchdown 8 weeks in a row or whatever it was like last year?
At least, yeah, a touchdown every other reception. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I do not think that's going to happen. But I do think his workload and his opportunity will be similar. And so I'm okay with that, even if he scores less touchdowns.
Yeah. Plus, you get the week 17 correlation with your ninth round pick, Tyler Boyd. So love that as well. So again, because I haven't talked to you on the stream in a month or so, who are some of the later picks that you have heavy exposure to? Guys that I know it's Mecole Hardman is one, but maybe some other guys around 15 or later that you find yourself clicking on pretty often when you need to fill out a position group.
I've started to take Hayden Hurst quite a bit more as like a second or a third tight end. So that's definitely one player that I'm super high on. I think what I'm going to do, Brian, is get our social media team some graphics with my exposures, your exposures, Chuck's exposures, and we can tweet out some of our highest exposed players for the people to see. I think that'd be kind of interesting for people in general. But Tyler Boyd is a wide receiver I'm pretty high on here in the middle of drafts. Richie James with the Chiefs is another wide receiver I have about 30% of. Hunter Henry with the Patriots. Obviously, Mike Gesicki is the higher ADP tight end, but I feel like Hunter Henry will still have a pretty healthy role in New England. I've got a decent bit of him. Who else is super late that we can talk about? Gus Edwards with the Ravens. I have about 25% of. Kenneth Gainwell with the Philadelphia Eagles. I've got about 20% of right now. those are some players that I'm drafting late.
I like most of them. Here's what I'll do. You know what? Let's wait. I don't want to influence any picks here. Make these next two picks, and I'll give you my highest exposed round 15 or later guys, and get your quick takes on them. But with round 12 and 13 here, what are you thinking? What positions are you trying to fill out? What correlations are you still trying to get?
I think this is where I'm fine now with looking at my second quarterback, second tight end, filling out my running back lottery tickets a little bit. And I think I'm going to top out around 8 wide receivers. So I'll probably take two more. I'll take two more if I want 8. I have 6 right now throughout the rest of the contest here. So I'm trying to pick my spots, though, with some correlations with the wide receivers if I can. But obviously, have to wait and see how the board shakes out. And I do think that is something to keep in mind when you're going through the second half of the draft here. If you have a target number of players at a position that you want roughly. Obviously, we'll deviate if need be. I don't want to go too quickly and hit my cap on wide receivers because I feel like that ninth, 10th wide receiver I select, now I'm probably losing value on my roster. That player is much less likely to crack my starting lineup, and I'm almost certainly underweight at another position. So
For
that's
sure.
why I talk about a target number where I'm like, I feel pretty good about that here. In a draft where I get Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson, this is a type of build where I want to limit myself to 2 of the quarterback and tight ends, just because I invested a lot of draft capital in that position already.
No, totally makes a lot of sense. All of that makes a lot of sense. And I just came up with an idea. And once you make your second pick here around the turn, we'll play this game with my late round picks, so we can get your thoughts. So you let me know when I'm about 10 seconds behind your draft. So we'll see here. And again, as Chris is making his picks, if you guys want to draft on Underdog Fantasy with us, you want the deposit match bonus, use promo code Occupy when you sign up. The link is in our description below. You go to underdogfantasy.com, enter the promo code there as well. And if you deposit $100, you'll get $100 free. That gives you $200 to start drafting with. You have the Best Ball Mania, which is $25 to enter. You want to get some experience, or you have a smaller bankroll, play some of the puppies that just came out, $5 a piece, I think, $3 a piece, whatever it is. And lots more drafts are going to be coming out, more contests for all bankroll levels. So underdogfantasy.com is the place to play best ball this summer. Chris, are we good to go?
I have got Tyler Algier here in round 12, another running back lottery ticket. If anything happens to Bijan Robinson, even if nothing happens to Bijan Robinson, I feel like he's going to play and score points for us. And I got to wait for 4 picks here to make my round 13 selection. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, I've been taking a decent amount of Algier too. I just feel like the run heavy nature of that offense, and if somehow Bijan goes down, then we have a top 20 running back likely. So, and I think there's also a chance that Cordell Patterson isn't with the team, just based on some of the articles I read. I don't know how likely that is, but if he is off the team, that obviously takes away more goal line and red zone touchdown chances in the event that Bijan is out. So I think Algier is a great pick at his ADP.
And then something Chuck and I did discuss last night. What if the number 1 pick in the 2023 NFL draft is actually good at football, Brian? Jonathan Mingo has a pretty good chance to be one of the top producing wide receivers for the Panthers this year. That is my round 13 selection today.
Well, that's a great transition into my highest exposed players after round 10. Mingo is one of them. So here's the game we'll play, Chris. For those of you who watch our MMA videos every week, Jake and I play a game called Good Fighter, Bad Fighter, Good Matchup, Bad Matchup, just to give context. So I'm going to name my highest exposed guys after round 10. Chris, I want you to tell me if they're a good or bad player and if their situation is good or bad. So here we go. Number
I like
one,
this.
number one exposure, Mike Gesicki.
Good player, good situation.
All right. We have Kenneth Gainwell.
Do we know if good player, bad situation?
Okay. Kenny Pickett. Ugh.
You say Kenny Pickett?
Yep.
Uh, bad player, good situation.
All right, we'll take that. Jonathan Mingo.
I think the fair answer here, okay. I don't know, good situation.
I was gonna say unknown is a perfectly acceptable answer here. So, all right, Mac Jones, your boy.
I feel like good player, bad situation. If we're talking about last year, I feel like good player, better situation this year.
Which is all I care about. Okay, Chuba Hubbard.
Bad player, bad situation.
Love that. Okay, Khalil Herbert for the Bears.
Good player. I'll say good situation.
All right. Tank Bigsby.
Unknown. Good situation.
All right. I'll give you two more here. Allen Robinson.
Probably good player, bad situation. A lot of depth ahead of him on the depth chart.
All right. I'm trying to find my latest round pick that I have 10% or more of. Let me see here. All right. This will work because he's going around 15 to 18, depending on the draft. Khalil Shakir for the Bills.
Unknown. Good situation.
Okay. I'll take that. All right. Fun game. Fun game. Do you want to flip it? Do you want to say some of your highest exposed late guys? And I will. But you're drafting. Never mind. I don't want to ruin your flow here drafting. We'll do that for another stream when I draft.
Well, I'll give you Nicole Hardman because he's my highest exposed player late. What do you think there?
Hmm. This is good. I feel like bad player, good situation. But he could be a good player in the right situation. But if Kansas City's not the right situation, then I don't know what is. So
Right.
I'll say bad player. If it truly is bad player, worst situation, but for round 18 or whatever, I think it's probably fine. That's my
All
cop
right.
out answer.
No, I'm fine with that answer. I'm willing to live with. I've got in my 30 rosters right now about over 50% McCole Hardman. So I am done
Ooh.
drafting McCole Hardman. I
Okay.
want to get that a little lower before the season starts. Tyler Higbee. Did you mention him on yours?
I did not, but he is a good player in a good situation.
Okay. I will take that. And I feel like he is the second best pass catcher as far as fantasy football goes on that offense behind Cup. And I love his cost right now. Loved it earlier when it was a little cheaper. I think he's up about 10 spots. I'll find that answer for you. He's up about a full round, 11.7 spots since Best Ball Mania 4 opened at the end of April. So we started around 156, going around 144 at this point. And obviously, I'll give you some more players that I'm heavily exposed to that we can talk about, but I'm gonna focus on the board here because it's getting pretty close to my turn once again.
Fair enough. You do that. I'll just comment on the Tyler Higbee ADP move. I do feel like that situation overall, outside of Cup, obviously was going third overall. Outside of him, I do feel like the entire offense is a little bit undervalued, and we're starting to seem to come up a little bit. Akers ADP has jumped a little bit. Higbee's is moving up slightly. Jefferson's has moved up a little bit. Stafford's maybe a hair. Obviously, this all hinges on Stafford's health, but everything I've seen says he's healthy. And this is a guy that this is an offense that everyone could not wait to draft after their Super Bowl run. So, you know, one down year, I'm willing to buy the dip, assuming Stafford's healthy.
I have no idea what Bodie Wins is doing here, the 11th hole, picking Higbee, Bryce Young, and Taysom Hill in rounds 12, 13, and 14. That blew up my spot a little bit. I was going to look at Bryce Young as my second quarterback here, but that's fine. We'll pivot. It's not a big deal. 1471 builds, and one of the larger movers, someone that could have a probably bad player, good situation here, Brian. I don't have a ton of him, but Jerome Ford with the
Yeah,
Cleveland Browns, anything happens to Nick Chubb, seems like he is going to be one of the better players to own if that's the case.
agree. And here's the thing: running back doesn't matter. So any running back that plays is technically a good player. So
There's your boy Kenny Pickett.
he is my boy this year. Unfortunately, I drafted him in the Scott Fish Bowl this week as well. So I am all in on a guy that I did not like coming out of college, but we're willing to change our opinions. So you
Right.
still have Brock Purdy in your back pocket. Here's your quarterback too, as well, right?
I don't have him in my back pocket anymore, Brian, because he is coming on down to the squad.
There we go.
Right at ADP 171, and more than okay with that here. Again, if anything happens to Lamar Jackson, we're not doing so hot on this on
True.
this team anyway, so it doesn't really matter on a certain level.
Really quickly, right before he was picked, Tim Patrick went off the board. Chuck and I talked about him last week as being a mover after some rumblings and some reports and some player quotes and even coaches quotes that Tim Patrick might be the best receiver in that room, in that wide receiver room in Denver, and how he was looking great at OTAs and Russ trusts him and all this stuff. So I really don't feel like it's a bad pick, even in the 15th round here. Will he outperform Judy and Sutton? Probably not, but will he get enough in what has to be an improved offensive situation with the change of coordinators? I don't mind it, assuming he's healthy.
No, not at all. This is a player that obviously has been in the league for a few years and has been one of those glue guys, I would say, on the Broncos roster in general, even going back to the halcyon days of like Drew Lock and some of the other
Hmm.
pretty terrible quarterbacks that they had to start. So when he got hurt in the preseason last year, I think it was a pretty devastating thing for that Broncos team. Obviously, he's getting steamed up pretty heavily by his teammates and now fantasy drafters here at the end of contests. The cost is fine. I'm fine with adding him to my rosters. I probably need a little bit more than what I have, which I believe is 0 right now. But to answer your question, I don't think he's going to outproduce Sutton and Judy, but obviously we would welcome that if we are drafting him.
Yeah, for sure. And I think again, I will say this every stream until it's not true, which may never be the case. I am overexposed on the entire Broncos this year. Not sure how it could possibly get any worse. Maybe Russ is officially washed, but I am willing to embrace the change, embrace the idea that a change in coordinator and coaching staff can make it better for Russ in this talented offense, at least as far as talented players go. And if that is the case, and if Sutton or Judy go down, Patrick, his ADP would rise at least 5 rounds, I would think. So I think there's some injury upside there as well for Tim Patrick.
Just getting caught up on what is still available to select some decently high upside players. All right, I know you are Washington area based, Maryland, DMV area. What do you think about Sam Howell and I think it's Jacoby Brissett, this quarterback battle that's going on there? Is there any credence to Sam Howell being the guy to trust all year, or do you think that's kind of BS right now?
That's a great question. I think the coaching staff itself has a pretty short leash when it comes to guys. So it would not shock me if they come out the gate 1-3 and Rivera is, all right, we gotta try to turn this around. Let's get Jacoby in there. That would not shock me at all. When in reality, it's probably not much of a difference between Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett. So I think if I was coaching the team, Hal would start all 17 games. However, as we've said many times before on every fantasy football show ever that we've done together, is that it's not up to us; it's up to the coaches. So I really don't think his job is safe. Is he the best fantasy option? Sure, but I think if you draft him, you have to assume that he's going to be benched for some games at some point.
They gave him that one start in the final week of the season last year, and I know we talked about it at the time. Like, this guy looks really good. How come he
Yeah.
hasn't been playing, to this point? So Rivera, probably feeling the pressure of trying to keep his job at some point this year, is probably liable to do something silly there. I would agree with you for sure.
I'll give you
All
a,
right.
an anecdote after you. Well, I can give it to you now, unless
Yeah, no,
you're.
you're good. I've got a reasonable plan in mind here, so I'm fine.
Okay, so my father is a massive Washington fan. Listens to all the sports talk radio, watches every game, just no matter what their record is. And he was just beside himself last year because he was calling for Sam Howell all year. You know how fans are, right? Calling for Sam Howell,
Mhm.
and then Sam Howell comes in, does pretty well, and then after the game, a lot of the reports were the coaching staff said, "Oh, we didn't know how good this guy was." And it's like, okay, well, he's been on your roster for fucking 10 months. How do you not know how good this guy is? Like, and if you don't know, like, why not give him a shot? It just the level of organizational incompetence, as many teams and fans of teams can attest to. Washington is not exempt from that.
All right. So I would love to add Dawson Knox as my second tight end and have another Buffalo Bill player, but a little worried about having same bye week as Mark Andrews if I'm only
Mm,
drafting two tight ends. So we will go with good player, good situation, Mike Gesicki.
Atta baby, love it. I drafted this exact team earlier today, this morning. It was an Andrews tight end, Gasicki number 2 tight end, same team. So good vibes for us today.
I like it. Good vibes on July 13th is all you can have. You don't know exactly how things are going to shake out, but I do think let's see, a 2-5-7-2, probably some lottery tickets at running back and wide receiver to close out the draft for me are what I am going to do here. And we'll have the first one in a couple of picks.
Okay.
Um,
As you're waiting, and if you have the guy in mind, that's fine. If you want to wait till after your pick, you can answer this question as well. But you and I were talking a little bit before we went live, but for the viewers watching live and on replay, What is your plan for best ball allocation over the coming weeks and 2 months now, start of the season? So how much are you looking to ramp up? How much are you looking to spread out? Are you looking to get in now? Are you looking to wait some? Are you looking to try to even it out over the next, 8 weeks or so? What is your plan generally, Chris, for your contest allocation?
I think when I look back at my allocations when the season kicks off in September, I feel like I would have done this wrong if I don't have the majority of my teams drafted in late July and August. Once we have some news in from training camps, from maybe some preseason games, some brief looks at what teams are planning to do with their offenses, because then we can make the absolute best decisions that we can. Looking at some of the performance in prior iterations of this tournament, Brian, the vast majority of lineups that advance are selected later in the summer, right before the NFL season starts. So, of course, we love talking about this stuff in April, May, June, July, and August. But we know the closer we get to the event beginning, which is the NFL season, we're going to have the best information to make decisions. So, I want to have as close to the maximum number of lineups in Best Ball Mania 4 as I can get to in my bankroll. So, that's what I'm going to be focusing on as well.
I think that's fair. That's an incredible point. I think we should all strive to do that. But I will say that doing these drafts now will have you so prepared by the time that comes around when you're looking to get all of your allocation. Chris, I can't say enough how much experience I gain with every single draft I do. That each new draft, I feel even more confident on where players are going to go and how I want to build out my correlations. So I feel by us doing 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 drafts by now, even if they're lower stakes, even if they're smaller contests. By the time we get into our big boy allocations come late July, late August, that we're going to feel really confident and really strong about how we're building.
Yeah, and obviously, I think I had a couple of panic picks in this draft we did tonight, or today, excuse me. It's still daytime out there. Sometimes when you never leave your house, you just don't realize what time it is anymore. But when I was unable to get a player I wanted, and I took Tyler Boyd, right? A lot of that is that instinct and kind of trained knowledge from doing so many
Yeah,
of these contests, knowing, okay, this is probably a good player to take in this range because this is where he goes. You're gonna learn that stuff just by getting the reps in. So getting the reps in here early, very, very important as we go to ramp up our play. And we do listen to ourselves when we give ourselves advice and feedback during shows. Something Chuck and I talked about last night, Brian, was maybe being a little bit more aggressive with guys like Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott at the end of these drafts. I mean, Elliott in round 17, I know he's not on a team, but I feel like he has a better chance to be a contributor somewhere as far as fantasy points are concerned, compared to guys like Travion Williams, Keontae Ingram, Jordan Mason. These are some of the running backs that go in this range. Elliott's going to sign somewhere and he's going to play. We're not sure where yet, but he will get a chance.
totally agree. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I would much rather play those guys, and I haven't really been building with them, guys like Kareem Hunt and Lenny and Zeke. But yeah, they're going to sign and they're going to score some points and likely contribute, which you really can't say out of most round 17 and round 18 picks. And to your point about it not being nighttime and not leaving your house, there was a fantastic contrast on yesterday's stream that you did with Chuck, where our social media guy Derek pointed out that it looks like you were drafting from Iceland, where it was pitch black outside, and Chuck was in Hawaii, as it was the brightest sun possible behind him. You could not have found a brighter contrast in drafting times for you two.
Yeah, we I don't think Chuck and I could possibly be any further apart. He's over there somewhere in the Los Angeles area. I'm just south of Boston, like just super far away, different time zones. Very, very funny visual, for sure. I think I'll take a wide receiver. Who's your favorite round 18 wide receiver that's not Nicole Hardman?
Dude, it's
Because I don't
freaking
have a plan here.
it's Allen Robinson. Um, Otherwise, it is Richie James, and I'll
Okay.
give you off the board name that we haven't really talked about yet. So let me just look through my exposures really quickly. A guy that I have the most of here late. Let me keep scrolling. I'll tell you 1 second. Marvin Jones is a guy I've been drafting a bit.
Okay.
I think in the first half of the season when Jameson's out, but also in 3 wide receiver sets, I don't see why he can't score some points late. And finally, it is. Let me see who else have I drafted more than once late. Um, Russell Gage is the other guy who I did mention earlier about trying to find that super thin Tampa Bay correlation if you miss out on the top 3 guys.
All right. I have a player in mind that I'm going to take here. That is going to be the first time I've added him to my selections. It's gross. I don't think this is a player that I would. I will say, just in general, we talked about managed leagues a couple times in this stream, Brian. Best ball has completely ruined my brain as far as
Yes.
sitting down for my managed league drafts. I feel like it's made me a worse season
Yeah.
long player in those environments. So to all my friends out there, you're welcome. Obviously, I have players that I like, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to draft guys like Jonathan Mingo and be like, when the fuck am I going to start this guy?
Yeah.
Never.
True.
Okay. I am going to select Nelson Aguilar here at pick 214 because there's some correlation with Lamar Jackson there. Very, very, very bad fantasy pick in general this year, but that's really the only circumstance I would be interested in him. Some extra correlation with my top quarterback. And if this is a player that if I'm able to advance into the playoff weeks, Brian, and he has some big weeks in week 15, 16, and 17, nobody's going to have him.
Bateman still dealing with foot issues. We don't even know if he's going to be 100% healthy. Beckham coming off the ACL and a full season missed. Non-zero chance we see Aguilar and some 2 and 3 wide receiver sets late in the year. And if you remember, I know this was a couple months ago, which seems like forever ago, but there was a time when the Ravens signed Nelson Aguilar to entice Lamar Jackson to stay because they had not yet signed Odell and they had not yet drafted Zay Flowers. And like, look, we got you Nelson Aguilar to go along with Rashad Bateman. So I think there's still a plan for Aguilar, and I agree. I think he's a guy that we all joke about his hands and whatnot, but he can score fantasy points when he's on the field. So he's an 18th round pick that I have zero exposure to, but I like your reason. I will start get him in some.
So $25 hopefully will turn into $3 million by December 31st. We'll find out. We'll be back on the channel at some point this weekend. I believe we're angling for a show on Friday. Not sure who the hosts are going to be just yet, but we will obviously announce that in the Discord. Brian, I don't know if you have any business you want to take care of on the stream here as we wrap it up, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Always a pleasure with you as well, Chris. And I would just say, if you made it this far and you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you are. Obviously, it helps us. We like to be transparent. The more subscribers we get, the better it is for our YouTube metrics. However, it's great for YouTube because it just gets you notified whenever we upload videos, whenever we go live. You don't have to ask us. You don't have to check your Discord notifications. You'll just get the notification when we go live or we schedule something. So being subscribed is the best way to do it. It's free to do here on YouTube. Give us the video a thumbs up. That just lets us know that you're watching it, you like it, lets us know that we need to make more of these videos. And the ADP tools that Chris have been talking about, all free. OccupyFantasy.com, and they're linked in the description below. So for Chris, go follow him on Twitter at RooneyFFB. I'm at Brian Jester FF. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching another Best Ball Draft, and we'll be back later this week.